Hello, and welcome to Retro Tech Repair. Today we're looking at this Samsung flat screen LCD TV that I bought on eBay. It's a SyncMaster 932MW and was bought for spares or repair. I think I paid about £15 for it, and I could probably have bought a working one for that, but I wanted to be able to repair it on the channel. I'm going to start straight away with the repair, and towards the end of the video I'll be explaining why I bought a TV, why I bought this particular TV, why this TV has some features that make it ideal for the purpose for which I bought it, and of course, what makes it retro tech. So let's get started. So the eBay seller described the TV as for spares or repair and said it was shutting off after a few seconds, and I think that's a fair description. My experience is just the same, and when I turn on the TV, it comes up just for a moment and then goes black. I've never repaired a TV before, and I'm not an expert in electronics, so we'll be learning this together for the first time. Opening up the TV seems to be pretty straightforward. There are just two screws at the bottom here next to the television bracket, and then I need to work around the edge of the TV case with a small pry tool. It gets a little bit easier as I work my way around, and eventually I'm able to partially lift off the front bezel. When I do that though, it looks like there's some sort of small electronics connected to the front bezel still, so instead I turn it over and I lift off the back. I can see the speakers. There's a small printed circuit board where the on-off switch is, which I'll disconnect in a moment. Then this is the back of the LCD panel itself, and what looks like a metal box I assume contains the main electronics. There are some connections to the bottom, so I need to unhook those, and now I can lift the electronics away from the plastics. There's a piece of tape over the connection between the electronics printed circuit assembly and the LCD panel, so I need to move the tape away, and then I can get in and disconnect the ribbon cable to the panel itself. There's then two additional connectors which I think go to the LCD backlight, but I can't work out how to remove these easily. I learned afterwards that I could remove the silver metal screen at the end of the printed circuit assembly, and that would enable me to access the connectors, but I didn't realise this until Reassembly, by which time I'd managed to work around it. Now we can see inside, and it seems to have two main boards, which I guess are the power supply board and the main logic board. So I remove the screws from the power board, and I remove the connections between the power board and the logic board, and then fold the power board over because I still can't figure out how to get those backlight cables disconnected. So looking over the power board now, I don't see anything immediately obvious that could be a failure. There's a large capacitor and some smaller electrolytics, some diodes and some other parts, but I don't see any bulging caps, and I don't see any other visual signs of failure. There's no burn marks, no thermal events, nothing obvious on this board. So I decide to turn my attention to the logic board, and to properly remove the logic board, I remove the screws holding it in place and then disconnect the screw locks from the back of this metal screen. Again, I don't see anything obvious. There's no failures on the board that are immediately apparent, and a detailed troubleshooting of it would be way beyond my capabilities. At this stage it seems like my best hope of repairing the TV is to find something simple on the power board, because I don't have the skills, experience, or equipment to do much more than a visual inspection on this board. So I turn my attention back to the power board and eventually manage to remove the connections to the LCD backlight. So after quite a lot of time spent searching the internet, I eventually find the service manual for this model of TV. But when I look at it, it's mainly about swapping boards and software updates. It's not about troubleshooting individual components on the board. The power board has its own part number and it's listed with a separate manufacturer, and I could buy one of these, but it's expensive. So I carry on searching, and eventually I find somebody who suggests that this part could be the one that's causing the problems I'm experiencing. This part apparently is the CCFL inverter transformer. CCFL stands for Cold Cathode Fluorescent Lamp and is the way that this LCD display must be backlit. This makes perfect sense since this was the preferred way to backlight an LCD panel until the advent of LED backlighting in around 2010. This is just one example why this TV is retro tech. The part number of the CCFL inverter transformer in this TV is TMS 91429CT. I'm sure other TVs have different part numbers and different transformers. The good news is that these parts don't look to be too expensive online, and I've just bought this cheap desoldering station, so we'll use the desoldering station now to remove the suspect part. With a little bit of patience, the part comes out pretty easily, and I was able to find a replacement part with the correct part number, new, for £4 on eBay. The advert lists the parts as suitable for the Samsung 932MW TV, so I have a pretty high degree of confidence that this is going to fit into our television. So here we are a few days later, this package arrives and sure enough, it contains the part that I'd ordered on eBay. Looking at it, it looks very similar, but I thought I'd take some basic resistance measurements of the suspect part that I've removed from the board and the new part in the hope that I would find some difference which would enable me to test similar parts in future and perhaps let other people diagnose similar problems that they might have in their TV rather than just swap parts out. I didn't find any differences. But nonetheless, I made the decision to go ahead and install the new part. Just bending the pins a little helps me to slot it into the printed circuit assembly, and then it's just a question of soldering it in place. So before I assemble the electronics, I wanted to quickly repair some of the plastics. When the TV was shipped, it was poorly packaged, and the TV stand was broken off. I don't need the stand, but where the bracket for it is broken, there is a piece rattling around inside, so I decided to glue it back in place. This probably won't be strong enough to hold the TV in place when the stand is in use, but since I don't intend to use the stand, that shouldn't be a problem. And it's better than having a big chunk of plastic rattling around inside the TV. So while the glue dries, I'll reinstall the power board and then the logic board into the TV frame. As I had mentioned before, if I had removed the silver EMC shield, this process would have been much simpler. But I managed eventually to reconnect the connectors for the backlight to the printed circuit assembly. And with the power board now in place, I reconnect the wires to the logic board and reinstall that in the frame. So now all that remains is for me to replace the screws holding the PCAs in place, reunite the frame containing the logic and the power board with the flat panel, reconnect the LCD panel to the logic board using the ribbon cable, and then I can mount the whole assembly back in the plastic enclosure. I had to fiddle around a bit to get the speakers connected back to the electronics. The speakers then sit on these kind of pegs which are mounted on the front bezel, and the whole thing clips back together, and we just need to reinsert the two screws on the back. So now that's all done, we can connect up some power and turn it back on and see if it works. Well, it's come on, and it hasn't turned off, so we're going to declare that a success. So if you have a similar TV with a similar fault that turns off the second it's turned on, maybe if you were to replace the inverter transformer, it might fix the problem. The cost of the part was only £4, and although when I factor in the cost of buying the TV I could probably have bought a working TV for the same price or less, this way I've learnt something, I've stopped the TV going into landfill, and now I've got something that will be useful for me in my future repairs. So overall, I'm very happy. So if you're about to stop the video at this stage, thank you so much for watching, and please remember to hit subscribe in order to see future repair videos. If you decide to stay around, I'm now going to explain why I picked up this particular TV and what features it has that make it useful for that purpose. The reason that I'm doing this is that I actually have some 8-bit consoles and 8-bit computers that I want to repair, and in order to do that I need to be able to hook them up to a TV. Now the TV that I have in my house is kind of new, and a new TV doesn't have all of the inputs that I might need. It doesn't have these SCART inputs like this one here does. It doesn't have an RGB. Now RGB is quite useful when I'm repairing or restoring some of those 8-bit computers. This particular TV is a few years old. It's in the sweet spot, I think, because it has an RGB input. It has composite input, I think that's down the side. It has the component inputs, and also it has HDMI and DVI and a PC input, as well as an antenna. What it doesn't have though, I think, is a digital tuner, and that's really why this becomes retro tech. This being only an analog tuner really is retro. So that just about wraps it up for our Samsung TV today. This has been the first time I've repaired a TV, and although I didn't really diagnose it, it still feels good to have fixed it. So if you made it this far, you will know that there are many retro console repairs and vintage computer repairs yet to come. And I hope to see you again on the channel. Until then, thank you so much for watching Retro Tech Repair. Hi, that's what's inside here. That could be a problem. Just the joystick works as it should. Great. And again. Oops. Select. I don't know if that's skill level or number of live around. I have it in a couple of places and then it stops. Grandstand scramble. Wonderful. Looking forward to fixing that.